The champagne glass slipped from my trembling fingers, shattering against the marble floor of the elegant ballroom. But the sound was nothing compared to the cruel laughter that had just erupted around me at my own son's wedding reception. Her? Useful? She's just a housewife. Michael's voice boomed across the table, his face flushed with alcohol and arrogance. What could she possibly know about the real world? The men at the table, all colleagues from Dataflow Solutions, the tech company where my son worked, burst into laughter. Even some of the women giggled behind their hands, their eyes filled with that particular brand of pity reserved for women they considered incomplete. I stood frozen, my elegant navy dress suddenly feeling like a costume I had no right to wear. These were supposed to be the people celebrating my Ethan's happiness. Yet here they were, tearing me apart for entertainment. "Mom, just ignore them," Ethan whispered, his face red with embarrassment. But I could see it in his eyes. He was ashamed of me too. 25 years of marriage, and what does she have to show for it? Continued Rosie, Michael's wife, her voice dripping with false sympathy. No career, no achievements, no independence, just existing. The words hit me like physical blows. I had spent decades building a home, raising children, supporting my husband's career, sacrificing my own dreams so that everyone else could chase theirs. And this was my reward. Public humiliation at the most important day of my son's life. "I mean, what does she even do all day?" laughed Jennifer, another colleague. "Watch soap operas and organize closets?" I wanted to disappear, to melt into the floor like the spilled champagne at my feet. My husband, Charlie, sat silent at the head table, his eyes fixed on his plate. No defense, no support, just the same quiet resignation that had characterized our marriage for years. But as I stood there, absorbing their cruelty, something began to shift inside me. A fire I hadn't felt in decades started to kindle in my chest. These people, these arrogant, self-satisfied people, had no idea who they were talking to. "You know what the funniest part is?" Michael continued, completely oblivious to the change in my expression. "She probably thinks she's contributed something meaningful to society, as if keeping house is some kind of noble calling." The laughter grew louder. I could feel the eyes of other wedding guests turning toward our table, drawn by the spectacle. My daughter-in-law, Jessica, looked mortified but said nothing. Even she seemed to agree with them. I took a deep breath, my hands steadying for the first time since the conversation began. Tomorrow, I decided, would be a very different day for all of them. "You're absolutely right, Michael," I said quietly, my voice cutting through their laughter like a blade. "I am just a housewife." They looked at me with surprise, clearly not expecting me to speak, let alone agree with them. I've never had to worry about performance reviews, or quarterly reports, or what do you call them? KPIs? I continued, a small smile playing at the corners of my mouth. "I've been so sheltered from the real world of work." Michael nodded smugly, thinking he had won some kind of victory. "I suppose I'll never understand the pressure you all face," I said, my voice growing stronger. "The constant worry about job security, the fear of not meeting expectations, the anxiety about pleasing your superiors." Something in my tone must have registered because Rosie's smile began to falter. "Especially in such a competitive market," I continued. "I imagine it must be terrifying to know that your entire livelihood depends on the whims of people you've never even met. People who could change your life with a single decision." The table had grown quiet now, the laughter dying away as if someone had turned down the volume on a radio. "But don't worry," I said, reaching for my purse. "I'm sure you'll all be fine. After all, you're such valuable employees. I'm certain your company appreciates everything you do." I kissed Ethan on the cheek, ignoring his confused expression. "Congratulations, sweetheart. I hope you and Jessica have a wonderful life together." As I walked away from the table, I could feel their eyes boring into my back. But for the first time in years, I wasn't running away from confrontation. I was walking toward something much more satisfying. The next morning, I would make some very important phone calls. And by Monday, every single person at that table would discover exactly what this useless housewife was capable of. But as I reached the exit of the ballroom, I turned back one last time to see Michael raising his glass in another toast, completely unaware that his world was about to change forever. If only he knew that the woman he had just humiliated owned the very company that paid his salary. Monday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that promised change. I sat in my home office, the same room these people would probably assume I used for organizing closets, staring at my computer screen. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was about to conduct the most important business meeting of my career, while wearing my favorite silk pajamas and fuzzy slippers. The truth was, I had been living a double life for 15 years. When Charlie's construction business started failing in 2008, I knew we were headed for financial ruin. But instead of panicking, I did what I had always done. I found a solution. Using the small inheritance I'd received from my grandmother, I quietly started investing in tech startups from our basement. What began as a desperate attempt to save our family became something I never expected. A genuine talent for recognizing potential. Data Flow Solutions was my crown jewel. I had been the silent partner who provided the initial funding when it was just 3 college students with a brilliant idea and no business plan. Now it was a multi-million-dollar company with over 200 employees, including the very people who had humiliated me 2 nights ago. The funny thing about being a silent partner is that people tend to forget you exist. The official CEO, Marcus Williams, was a brilliant tech mind, but needed someone to handle the financial strategy. I had been that someone for over a decade, making decisions from behind the scenes while he took the credit. It was an arrangement that had worked perfectly, until Saturday night. I picked up my phone and dialed Marcus's direct line. "Savannah, how was Ethan's wedding?" His voice was warm, genuinely pleased to hear from me. Unlike my family, Marcus had always respected my contributions. "Enlightening," I replied, settling back in my chair. "Marcus, I think it's time we had a conversation about company culture." "Oh? What kind of conversation?" I told him about Saturday night, watching his shocked silence grow with each detail. When I finished, there was a long pause. "Savannah, I had no idea you knew any of our employees personally, and certainly not that they would." He trailed off, clearly appalled. "Well, now you do, and I have some ideas about how we might address this situation." "I'm listening." For the next hour, we crafted a plan that was both educational and, I had to admit, deliciously satisfying. Data Flow Solutions would be implementing a new company-wide initiative focused on community values and social responsibility. Every employee would be required to participate in a week-long evaluation process that included both professional performance reviews and mandatory volunteer work. "We'll call it the Value Assessment Program," Marcus said, his voice gaining enthusiasm. "Everyone will need to demonstrate their commitment to the company's values of respect, integrity, and community service." "Exactly. And those who fail to meet our standards." I let the sentence hang in the air. "We'll need to find employment elsewhere," Marcus finished grimly. "Savannah, are you sure about this? It's pretty aggressive." I thought about Saturday night, about the laughter, about the way they had dismissed not just me, but every woman who had chosen to dedicate her life to her family. "I'm absolutely certain." After hanging up with Marcus, I made my second call of the day. Janet Morrison had been my friend since college, and she now ran the city's largest network of domestic violence shelters and community support programs. If my former tormentors were going to learn about the value of housewives, they were going to do it the hard way. "Janet, it's Savannah. I need a favor." "Of course, honey. What's going on?" I explained my plan, and Janet's laughter filled my office. "Oh, Savannah, this is perfect. We've been desperate for more volunteers, especially for our job training programs for women re-entering the workforce. Most of our clients are women who've been out of traditional employment for years. Raising children, caring for elderly parents, managing households. Exactly the kind of women my son's colleagues think are useless. When do you need them to start?" "This week. And Janet, make sure they get the full experience. I want them to understand exactly what these women face when people like them control their economic futures." My third call was to Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a sociologist I'd met through various charity boards. If this program was going to have lasting impact, it needed to be more than just volunteer work. It needed to be educational. Dr. Rodriguez, I'm wondering if you'd be interested in conducting some workshops on the economic value of unpaid domestic work? Savannah, you know that's one of my favorite topics. The economic value of unpaid household labor in the United States is estimated at over $1.2 trillion annually. Most people have no idea. That's exactly what I want them to learn. By noon, everything was in place. Data Flow Solutions would officially announce the value assessment program by close of business today. All employees would receive their assignments by Wednesday, and the evaluation would begin immediately. I was just finishing my notes when my phone rang. The caller ID showed my son's name. Mom? Ethan's voice was tentative, unsure. I wanted to call and apologize for Saturday night. The way Michael and the others talked to you, it wasn't right. My heart softened slightly. Thank you, sweetheart. I was embarrassed, and I handled it badly. Jessica and I talked about it yesterday, and she feels terrible too. She wanted me to tell you that she thinks you're amazing, and that she hopes she can be half the mother and wife you've been. I felt tears prick my eyes. Maybe not everyone had joined in the cruelty. There's something else, Mom. Michael called me this morning, really upset. Apparently, his company is implementing some new evaluation program, and he's worried about his job. He sounded scared. I allowed myself a small smile. Well, honey, these are challenging times in the business world. I'm sure he'll be fine if he's as valuable an employee as he claimed to be. Mom, you sound different. Are you okay? I'm better than I've been in years, Ethan. Better than I've been in years. After we hung up, I made one final call of the day. Charlie was at his office, probably wondering why I had left the wedding reception so abruptly. Savannah, are you all right? You disappeared Saturday night. Charlie, we need to talk. Tonight, when you get home. About a lot of things. Is everything okay? I looked around my office, at the financial reports spread across my desk, at the framed photo of the first Data Flow Solutions board meeting, where I had been conspicuously absent from the picture despite funding the entire operation. Everything is about to be much more honest than it's been in a very long time. As I hung up the phone, I realized that Saturday night hadn't just been about humiliation. It had been about awakening. For 15 years, I had hidden in the shadows, letting others take credit for my work, accepting the role of the invisible woman who made everything possible but received no recognition. But those days were over. By the end of this week, everyone would know exactly who Savannah Thompson really was. And more importantly, they would understand the true value of women like me, women they had dismissed as just housewives. The best part? They had no idea what was coming. Tuesday morning brought the first wave of panic calls. I was in my kitchen, making coffee, and enjoying the autumn sunlight streaming through my carefully arranged herb garden, when my phone started buzzing incessantly. The first text was from Michael. Mrs. Thompson, this is Michael from Ethan's wedding. I hope you don't mind me getting your number from him. I'm in a bit of a situation at work and wondered if you might know anyone who could help with volunteer opportunities. It's urgent. I nearly choked on my coffee. The irony was exquisite. More messages followed throughout the morning. Rosie, Jennifer, even some of the other colleagues who had joined in the laughter. All of them suddenly desperately polite, asking the housewife for help with their community service requirements. But it was the call from Jennifer that truly satisfied me. Mrs. Thompson, this is Jennifer Walsh. We met at the wedding? Her voice was tight with barely controlled panic. I'm so sorry to bother you, but I'm hoping you might have some connections in the community. My company has assigned me to work with women who are re-entering the workforce, and I honestly don't know where to start. I stirred my coffee slowly, savoring the moment. Oh, Jennifer! How wonderful that your company values community service. What exactly do you need to do? I have to spend 20 hours this week working with women who've been out of the traditional workforce, helping them with job skills and interview preparation. And then I have to write a report about the economic value of unpaid domestic work. She paused, her voice dropping. I keep thinking about Saturday night, about what I said about housewives, and I'm realizing I might have been insensitive. Insensitive? I repeated. my voice carefully neutral. I think I may have seriously underestimated the challenges these women face. The program coordinator, Janet Morrison, showed me some statistics yesterday that absolutely shocked me. Did you know that if domestic work were valued at market rates, it would represent over $1 trillion in economic activity annually? No, I had no idea. I lied smoothly. That's fascinating. Mrs. Thompson, I know this is presumptuous, but you seem like someone who really understands the value of family and community. Would you be willing to help me understand what I'm getting into? I feel completely out of my depth. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Of course, Jennifer. Why don't you come by my house this afternoon? I'd be happy to share some insights about the challenges facing women in your situation. Women in my situation? Women who are about to learn that their assumptions about other women's worth might cost them everything they've worked for. The silence on the other end was deafening. What do you mean? I'll see you at 2 o'clock, Jennifer. I'll text you my address. After hanging up, I called Janet to check on how the first day of community service had gone. Savannah, it's been absolutely brutal for them, Janet said, and I could hear the satisfaction in her voice. Michael spent 4 hours yesterday working with Maria, a single mother of 3 who's been trying to find work after her divorce. She has an MBA, speaks 3 languages, and has been managing a household and raising children for 8 years. But every interview she goes to, they act like she's been sitting around doing nothing. How did Michael handle it? He was shocked. Maria had to explain to him why just being a housewife had actually given her project management skills, budget management experience, crisis resolution abilities, and multitasking capabilities that most executives never develop. By the end of the session, he looked like he'd been hit by a truck. And the others? Rosie broke down crying when she met Carmen, a woman who'd been caring for her elderly mother with dementia for 5 years. Carmen has a doctorate in engineering, but she's been blacklisted from her field because companies assume she's lost her edge. Rosie kept apologizing, saying she never realized how much sacrifice was involved in caregiving. I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and genuine sadness. These women's stories were all too real, all too common. My plan was working, but the cost was becoming clear to everyone involved. Janet, are any of them actually learning, or are they just panicking? Oh, they're learning all right. Jennifer spent yesterday with Rosa, who's been trying to re-enter the workforce after 15 years of raising 4 children. Rosa has been volunteering at 3 different organizations, running a neighborhood food bank, and managing a household budget that would make most CFOs weep. But she can't get an interview because she has a gap in her resume. How did Jennifer react? She asked Rosa to teach her how to manage a food bank operation. Apparently, she realized that Rosa's organizational skills far exceeded her own, and she wanted to learn from her. This was unexpected. Maybe there was hope for some of them after all. The doorbell rang at exactly 2 o'clock. Jennifer stood on my doorstep, looking haggard and uncertain. Gone was the confident, dismissive woman from the wedding. In her place was someone who looked genuinely humbled. Mrs. Thompson, thank you so much for agreeing to see me. I led her to my living room, the same space where I'd been conducting million-dollar business deals via video conference for years. She perched nervously on the edge of my sofa, clutching a notebook. Jennifer, before we begin, I want to ask you something. What did you think I did with my time before Saturday night? She flushed red. I assumed you were I thought you were just a traditional housewife. I didn't realize. She stopped, struggling for words. You didn't realize what? I didn't realize how much work that actually involves. Or how much skill. Yesterday, Rosa showed me her monthly budget spreadsheet, and it was more complex than anything I've ever created for our company. She's managing 6 different income streams, coordinating schedules for 4 kids, 3 elderly relatives, and 2 volunteer organizations, and she's doing it all while maintaining a household that would make a hotel manager jealous. I nodded, saying nothing. Mrs. Thompson, I owe you an apology. What I said Saturday night was cruel and ignorant. I've spent the last 2 days learning about the women in this community, and I'm ashamed of my assumptions. Tell me what you've learned. For the next hour, Jennifer shared stories from her volunteer work. She talked about meeting women with advanced degrees who had stepped away from careers to care for family members, women who had started businesses from their homes while raising children, women who had managed complex family finances, coordinated community events, and supported their husbands' careers while sacrificing their own professional ambitions. The most shocking part, Jennifer said, her voice growing stronger, is realizing that these women aren't behind in their careers because they're lazy or incompetent. They're behind because people like me have created systems that punish them for making sacrifices that benefit society as a whole. And what are you going to do about that realization? I don't know yet, but I know I can't go back to thinking the way I did before, and I need to find a way to make this right. I studied her face, looking for signs of manipulation or insincerity. But what I saw was genuine remorse and a dawning understanding of the magnitude of what she'd been blind to. Jennifer, can I ask you something? Do you know who owns Dataflow Solutions? She looked confused by the change of subject. I think it's Marcus Williams, our CEO. Why? Marcus is the CEO, but he's not the owner. The company is privately held by a silent partner who's been making strategic decisions behind the scenes for 15 years? Oh, I had no idea. We've always just assumed Marcus was in charge of everything. I stood up and walked to my desk, pulling out a folder I'd prepared. I want to show you something. Inside were copies of the original investment documents, board meeting minutes, and financial reports, all bearing my signature as the primary investor and decision-maker for Dataflow Solutions. Jennifer's face went white as she read. You're the owner? I'm the woman you dismissed as just a housewife who's been running the company that pays your salary for the past decade and a half. The notebook fell from her hands. Oh my God. Savannah, we had no idea. No, you didn't. And that's exactly the problem. You assumed that because I wasn't visible in the corporate world, I wasn't contributing to it. You assumed that because I chose to prioritize my family, I was somehow less capable or valuable than you. Jennifer was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. What happens now? Are you going to fire us all? I considered the question carefully. That depends entirely on what you do with what you've learned this week. The evaluation isn't just about community service, Jennifer. It's about whether you can grow from this experience and become the kind of person who builds others up instead of tearing them down. How do I do that? You start by treating every woman you meet, whether she's a CEO or a stay-at-home mother, with the respect she deserves. You advocate for policies that support women re-entering the workforce. You challenge your colleagues when they make assumptions about people's worth based on their visibility or traditional career paths. Jennifer nodded frantically. Yes, absolutely. I'll do whatever it takes. We'll see, I said quietly. Because tomorrow, you're going to face the hardest part of this evaluation. You're going to meet with the other women from the wedding, and together, you're going to present your findings to the entire company. And you're going to do it in front of the owner you never knew existed. Jennifer's eyes widened in panic. The others don't know either? Oh no. I smiled, feeling the sweet anticipation of justice finally being served. None of them know, but they're all about to find out exactly who they decided to humiliate at my son's wedding. Thursday morning arrived with the kind of crisp clarity that makes everything seem possible. I stood in front of my closet, selecting my outfit for what would undoubtedly be the most satisfying day of my life. Not the silk pajamas I'd worn for secret business calls. Not the modest dresses I'd hidden behind for years. Today called for power dressing in its truest form. I chose a sharp navy blazer, tailored perfectly to project authority, paired with heels that added 3 inches to my height and 10 years to my confidence. As I applied my makeup, I caught my reflection's eye in the mirror. The woman looking back at me was no longer the invisible housewife who had accepted humiliation in silence. She was Savannah Thompson, CEO and owner of a multi-million-dollar company, ready to reclaim her identity. The Dataflow Solutions headquarters buzzed with an undercurrent of anxiety that I could feel the moment I walked through the glass doors. Employees clustered in small groups, whispering about the mysterious value assessment program and the presentation that would determine their futures. Marcus met me in the lobby, his face a mixture of excitement and concern. Savannah, Are you sure you're ready for this? Once you reveal yourself, there's no going back to the shadows. I've been ready for 15 years, Marcus. I just didn't know it until Saturday night. The main conference room had been set up for the presentation. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, and I positioned myself at the head of the long mahogany table where I'd sat invisibly through video calls for over a decade. Today, I would be very visible indeed. At exactly 10 o'clock, the participants filed in. Michael entered first, his usual swagger replaced by nervous energy. Rosie followed, clutching a thick folder against her chest like a shield. Jennifer caught my eye and gave me a small, knowing nod. She was the only one who understood what was about to happen. "Good morning, everyone," Marcus began. "Thank you for participating in our value assessment program this week. As you know, this initiative is designed to ensure that all Dataflow Solutions employees understand and embody our company values of respect, integrity, and community service." The group nodded earnestly, their faces reflecting the genuine transformation many had undergone over the past few days. Before we hear your presentations, I'd like to introduce someone very important to our company. Someone who's been instrumental in Dataflow's success, but has chosen to remain behind the scenes until now. Marcus paused, savoring the moment. "I'd like you to meet Savannah Thompson, founder and primary shareholder of Dataflow Solutions." The silence that followed was deafening. I watched as recognition dawned on their faces, first confusion, then disbelief, then horror, as they realized exactly who I was. Michael's face went from pale to red to green in rapid succession. You're the owner? But you're Ethan's mother. You're just a housewife?" I finished, my voice calm and measured. "Yes, I am Ethan's mother. I am a housewife. I'm also the woman who invested her inheritance to turn 3 college students' brilliant idea into the company that employs all of you." Rosie made a small whimpering sound, her folder slipping from nerveless fingers to scatter papers across the floor. "I understand you've all had quite an educational week," I continued, settling into my chair with the ease of someone who belonged there. "I'm looking forward to hearing what you've learned about the value of work that often goes unrecognized and uncompensated." Jennifer was the first to find her voice. Ms. Thompson," she stopped, flustered. "What should we call you?" "Savannah will be fine. After all, we're colleagues now, aren't we?" She nodded shakily. "Savannah, would you like me to go first?" "Please." Jennifer stood, her hands trembling slightly as she opened her presentation folder. "This week, I worked with women who are trying to re-enter the workforce after periods of caregiving and family management. What I learned fundamentally changed my understanding of what constitutes valuable work and professional experience." She clicked to her first slide, a photograph of Rosa, the woman she'd worked with at the community center. "This is Rosa Martinez. She has a master's degree in business administration and 15 years of experience in project management. For the past 8 years, she's been managing a household of 6 people, coordinating care for an elderly parent with dementia, overseeing the education of 4 children, and running a community food bank that serves over 200 families monthly." Jennifer's voice grew stronger as she continued. "Rosa's organizational skills, crisis management abilities, and budget oversight experience exceed those of most corporate executives I know. Yet she's been unable to find employment because potential employers see an 8-year gap in her resume and assume she's been inactive." I nodded approvingly. "And what did you learn from this?" "I learned that I've been part of a system that systematically undervalues the most essential work in our society. Rosa isn't behind in her career because she lacks skills or ambition. She's behind because people like me, people like I was, refuse to recognize caregiving and household management as the complex, valuable work it actually is." Michael cleared his throat nervously. "May I go next?" I gestured for him to proceed, curious to see if his transformation had been as genuine as Jennifer's appeared to be. "I worked with Maria Gonzalez," he began, his voice lacking its usual bravado. "Maria has an MBA from Northwestern and spent 10 years in corporate finance before her divorce. She's been trying to find work for 18 months while raising 3 children as a single mother." He pulled up a chart showing Maria's daily schedule. Maria's typical day begins at 5 a.m. and ends at midnight. She manages a household budget that requires the precision of a CFO, coordinates schedules that would challenge any operations manager, and handles crisis resolution that would overwhelm most executives I know. Yet, Michael continued, his voice growing firm with conviction, every interview she attends, she's asked to explain her employment gap, as if raising children and managing a household during a contentious divorce was somehow time wasted rather than experience gained. I was impressed despite myself. Michael's arrogance had been replaced by genuine understanding. Rosie stood next, tears already forming in her eyes. I worked with Carmen Rodriguez, who spent 5 years caring for her mother who had Alzheimer's disease. Carmen has a doctorate in engineering and 20 years of experience in aerospace design. But because she stepped away from her career to provide end-of-life care, companies now consider her outdated and uncommitted. Her voice broke slightly. Carmen taught me that caregiving requires skills I never imagined: medical knowledge, financial planning, emotional intelligence, advocacy, crisis management, and the ability to make life and death decisions under pressure. She literally kept another human being alive and comfortable for 5 years. But employers see this as a weakness rather than strength. One by one, each participant shared their experiences. Stories of brilliant women whose contributions had been dismissed, whose sacrifices had been devalued, whose skills had been overlooked because they didn't fit traditional corporate narratives. When the presentations concluded, the room fell silent. I stood slowly, looking at each face around the table. 3 days ago, at my son's wedding, you laughed at me for being just a housewife. You dismissed me as useless, as someone who had contributed nothing meaningful to society. My voice remained calm, but the steel underneath was unmistakable. This week, you've learned that the women you so casually dismissed possess skills and experience that rival or exceed your own. Michael found the courage to speak. Savannah, we were wrong. Completely, inexcusably wrong. And we're sorry. Sorry isn't enough, I replied. Sorry doesn't change the systems that punish women for making choices that benefit everyone. Sorry doesn't help Rosa find employment or give Carmen back the 5 years of career advancement she lost while caring for her dying mother. The room was silent, waiting. However, I continued, genuine change might be enough. Jennifer, your presentation showed real understanding and growth. Michael, you've clearly grasped the complexity of what you dismissed. Rosie, your work with Carmen demonstrates empathy and learning. I paused, letting the suspense build. Therefore, none of you will be fired, but all of you will be transferred to our new Community Partnership Division, which launches Monday morning. Your job will be to develop programs that help women like the ones you met this week transition back into the workforce. You'll create mentorship programs, advocate for resume evaluation changes, and ensure that Data Flow Solutions becomes a model for inclusive hiring practices. Relief flooded their faces, followed quickly by determination. And Jennifer, I added, you'll be leading the division. I was impressed by your genuine transformation and your commitment to making things right. Jennifer's eyes widened in shock. You're promoting me? After what I did? I'm giving you the opportunity to prove that growth is possible, that people can change, and that admitting mistakes is the first step toward making meaningful impact. As the meeting concluded and people filed out, talking excitedly about their new roles, I remained seated, savoring the moment. Justice had been served, but more importantly, real change was beginning. Marcus approached as the room emptied. How do you feel? I smiled, finally ready to step fully into the light, like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. But as I gathered my papers, my phone buzzed with a text that would change everything once again. It was from Charlie. We need to talk. Tonight. I know about data flow. I arrived home that evening to find Charlie sitting at our kitchen table, surrounded by papers I hadn't seen in years. Bank statements, investment records, legal documents, 15 years of carefully hidden financial history spread across the mahogany surface like evidence at a crime scene. Hello, Savannah, he said quietly, not looking up from the documents. Or should I say, hello to the secret CEO of Data Flow Solutions. My heart hammered against my ribs, but I forced my voice to remain steady. How long have you known? I've suspected for years, he admitted, finally meeting my eyes. The mysterious consulting fees that appeared in our accounts every month. The way you always seem to know about tech industry trends. The phone calls you thought I didn't hear. He gestured to the papers. But I didn't have proof until yesterday, when Ethan mentioned that some of his colleagues were facing employment reviews. I did some digging. I set my purse down carefully, buying myself time to think. After facing down my tormentors at the office, I had imagined this conversation would be easier. I was wrong. Are you angry? I asked. Charlie was quiet for a long moment, his weathered hands shuffling through the bank statements. At 62, he looked older than his years, worn down by the weight of a construction business that had never fully recovered from the 2008 recession, and I now realized the burden of believing he was our family's sole provider. Angry? He laughed, but there was no humor in it. Savannah, I'm devastated. The word hit me like a physical blow. Devastated? For 15 years, I've watched you sacrifice everything for this family. I've seen you give up your dreams, your identity, your sense of self-worth, all to support my failing business and raise our children. I've carried the guilt of not being able to provide for you the way I thought you deserved. His voice cracked. And all this time, you've been the one providing for us. I sank into the chair across from him, suddenly understanding the true magnitude of what my secret had cost us both. Charlie, I never meant... You've been carrying the financial weight of this family for 15 years while letting me believe I was the breadwinner. Do you have any idea what that does to a man's sense of purpose? His identity? The pain in his voice was raw, genuine. I had been so focused on protecting his pride that I had never considered how the truth might actually set us both free. I thought I was helping, I whispered. Your business was struggling, and I had this opportunity. I thought if I could just quietly contribute without making you feel what? Emasculated? Like a failure? Charlie's laugh was bitter. Savannah, I've felt like a failure for 15 years anyway. Every month when the bills came due and I couldn't cover them, every time you said, don't worry, we'll figure it out. Every time I saw you wearing the same clothes year after year while insisting we couldn't afford new ones for you. I stared at him, realization dawning. You knew we had more money than what your business brought in. Of course I knew. I'm not stupid. But I convinced myself you were just better at managing our finances, that maybe you were getting help from your family, or taking on small jobs I didn't know about. I never imagined. He gestured helplessly at the papers. I never imagined you were running a multi-million-dollar company. We sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of 15 years of misunderstanding settling between us. What happens now? I asked finally. Charlie stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the garden I had tended for decades while secretly conducting business deals that could have bought us a dozen gardens in the most exclusive neighborhoods. I don't know, he said honestly. I'm proud of you, Savannah. What you've accomplished is extraordinary, but I'm also hurt that you didn't trust me enough to tell me the truth. I was protecting you. No. He turned back to face me, his expression gentle but firm. You were protecting yourself. You were protecting the image of the supportive wife who sacrifices everything for her family. You were protecting the narrative that made you feel noble and necessary. His words stung because they were true. I had wrapped my secrecy in the cloak of selflessness, but perhaps it had been as much about my own need to feel indispensable as it was about protecting his ego. You're right, I admitted. I was afraid that if you knew I didn't need your financial support, you might not need me at all. Charlie's expression softened. Savannah, I didn't fall in love with you because you needed me to provide for you. I fell in love with your intelligence, your strength, your incredible ability to see solutions where others saw only problems. The fact that you've spent 15 years proving exactly those qualities while building a business empire, it doesn't make me love you less. It makes me wonder why you thought it would. I felt tears beginning to form. Because I thought being needed was the same as being loved, and I thought being the provider was the same as being worthy. Charlie came back to the table and sat down, reaching for my hands. We've both been playing roles that we thought the other wanted, haven't we? I nodded, unable to speak. Savannah, I want to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Okay. Are you happy? Really, truly happy with the life we've built together? The question hung in the air between us. I thought about the past 15 years, the secret phone calls, the hidden successes, the constant performance of being less than I was. I've been fulfilled professionally, I said carefully. But personally, I've been lonely, Charlie. I've been lonely for 15 years, living a double life and never being able to share my real successes or challenges with the person I love most. And I've been lonely too, he admitted, feeling like a failure, like I was letting down the woman who gave up everything for me, never knowing that you were actually thriving in ways I couldn't imagine. We looked at each other across the table, two people who had spent decades loving each other while fundamentally misunderstanding what the other needed. What do we do now? I asked. Charlie smiled for the first time since I'd walked in. Now we start over. Honestly this time. What does that look like? Well, for starters, you're going to tell me everything about data flow solutions. I want to hear about every triumph, every challenge, every brilliant decision you've made. I want to know my wife, all of her, not just the part she thought I could handle. I felt something loosening in my chest, a tension I'd carried for so long I'd forgotten it was there. And then, Charlie continued, we're going to figure out what comes next. Maybe I'll finally close down the construction business and we can work together. Maybe I'll go back to school and learn about technology so I can understand your world better. Maybe we'll travel and you can conduct business calls from beaches in Tuscany instead of hiding in our basement office. You'd want to work with me? Savannah, I've spent 15 years feeling like I was drowning while you threw me life preservers and pretended they were driftwood. Now I find out you've been the captain of a yacht the whole time? He laughed, and this time there was genuine humor in it. Damn right I want to work with you. I want to be your partner in everything, not just the man you feel obligated to protect from the truth. I stood up and walked around the table, settling into his lap the way I had when we were young, and the future seemed infinite with possibility. I love you, I said. I love you, and I'm sorry I didn't trust you with all of me. I love you too, he whispered against my hair. And I'm sorry I didn't create a space where you felt safe to be all of yourself. As we held each other in our kitchen, surrounded by the evidence of my secret life, I realized that Saturday night's humiliation had given me more than just revenge or justice. It had given me the courage to finally stop hiding. The next morning, I would call Marcus and arrange for Charlie to visit Data Flow Solutions. We would rebuild our marriage on a foundation of complete honesty. And together, we would figure out what came next for a couple who had spent 15 years loving each other while living separate lives. But for now, we were simply Savannah and Charlie, not CEO and construction worker, not provider and dependent, not housewife and breadwinner, just two people who had finally found their way back to each other. The woman who had been humiliated at her son's wedding was gone. In her place was someone I was only just beginning to meet, Savannah Thompson, exactly as she was meant to be,